Okay, hello. The recording has started. Hi, everybody. My name is Stacy Nell. I'm the Executive Director of the Kansas African American Affairs Commission. And today we're doing our lunch and learn. I know normally it goes at noon. It's going to wind up going out around 12:30 just for some technical issues on my end. But I am thrilled to be joined today by one Miss Marquetta Atkins. Actually, and she's not going to be by herself. We'll get to that in a bit. Marquetta Atkins with Destination Innovation in Wichita. Hi.
Hi, how you doing? I'm happy to be here.
I'm happy to be here too. Well, let me read your bio, then we'll go through the whole process of how we got here. So, Destination Innovation, and today specifically, we're going to talk a lot about Progeny under the umbrella of Destination Innovation. So, Progeny is a youth adult partnership focused on reimagining the juvenile justice system and reinvestment into community-based alternatives. Their vision is to transform the juvenile justice system in Kansas by closing the remaining state youth prison and shifting power to the communities most impacted by these systems through investments in programs that build a healthier Kansas for youth development. Marquetta Atkins, the executive director of Destination Innovation, is a community educator who brings her passion for working with youth and her creative energy to the table as a facilitator. She was born and raised in Wichita, Kansas, and graduated with a degree in communications from Wichita State University. Her persistence in reaching her educational goals equipped her to be a mentor for high school youth in Wichita. In 2015, she founded Camp Destination Innovation to expose young people to a variety of career options and encouraging them to create their own future and explore strategies for entrepreneurship and civic engagement. So thank you, Marquetta, for taking some time today.
Thank you for having me.
Cool. My first question is always, what are you having for lunch?
I haven't had anything yet. Literally, I have some cherries and some strawberries over there on the desk, and that's probably what I'm gonna munch on until I get home.
And then I'm sure astute observers are wondering, what's this disembodied shoulder next to you? So
This I have the pleasure of having next to me, Yusuf Presley.
yes, Yusuf Presley, who
Yeah.
happened to be in the office when we set to record, and I'm like, well, bring him on. And I pulled his bio off the internet. He's like, what? I'm like, I can Google you now. Also born and raised in Wichita, Yusuf Presley is a former youth leader who is now a staff member at Progeny and the Kansas-based juvenile justice organization Progeny, who understands how well the Kansas system impacts youth from the lens of being in the foster care system since he was 5. He has a strong voice and insight into the foster care to prison pipelines and wants to work to ensure that future young people are not exposed to hardships and lack of governance that he has endured in the system. Along with Progeny, Yusuf sits on the national level youth representative on the Center for Law and Social Policy team and is an alumni youth leader for the national organization Youth First. So I'm thrilled to have you here today as well, Yusuf.
And his
Thank you for having me.
bio is so updated because he sits on so many committees and so many chairs right now. What's the you just got on Dream?
Oh, I'm a Dream Justice Cohort fellow right now. We so part of what we're doing there is we're learning how to campaign, which I already kind of know how to campaign. We're campaigning, fundraising, and grant writing, just all things advocacy. And so
And he's a recent graduate of Black to the Future, where they did the same thing, learning how to move Black communities around policy and organizing and getting communities involved and invested. So he's been out here working.
So is that a Kansas organization or is that a nationwide?
That's nationwide.
I have to look into that. Okay, but Marquetta, so you have to do like adjust the. We're going to be playing.
We are grassroots here, y'all.
Listen, no shame in your game. All right, we're making do. We're figuring out how to make this do. So I did want to talk again about the umbrella of Destination Innovation because I know that there are several sort of arms to that. So you did Camp Destination Innovation start first?
Yes, so that was the very first program that I started. And the intent, I started at the Urban League of Kansas when I was the manager of the education. And the intent was to do a summer program that wasn't like typical programs. I wanted to do something that was inventive and creative. And I always used to hear conversations about, when people ask kids, what do you want to be when you grow up? And one thing I don't do is I don't ask, what do you want to be when you grow up? I ask kids, what do you want to be? Because a lot of things they can be today that leads them to what they do when they get older. And I wanted to kids to explore non-traditional jobs. Because typically when you ask a kid, what do you want to be? They'll do they have been taught. They say what they have been taught to say. I want to be a teacher, a doctor, a lawyer, which are all admirable jobs. But what about an actuary? What about an ocean biologist? What about all these jobs and careers that are not within their realm of knowing about? I wanted to expose kids to that. And then the second year, I wanted to focus on entrepreneurship. And once we hit entrepreneurship, that's kind of where we stayed, because too often we teach kids, especially Black and brown kids, we teach them how to be career ready, but we never are workforce ready, but we never teach them how to be the inventors, the creators, or the people that create the jobs that the workforce needs. And
Right.
we need our kids to be creators too.
I love it. I love it. So that's what Camp Destination does. And
Mhm.
those are through the summer.
Yeah, we do. Well, we have a summer program, and then we have arms. All of our programs have arms. So we have Camp Destination Innovation, and then the spring we do our uh, YEC, which is our Urban Wichita Youth Entrepreneurship Challenge, where high school kids can win up to $1,000, and we're partnered with Network Kansas on that. And then we're preparing right now for our KIVAC, which is our Kansas Youth Virtual Entrepreneurship Challenge. That is going to be happening. It opens up in September. And it takes kids all across the state. They can pitch a 4 to 5 minute video and have a chance to win money. And we work with kids from elementary all the way up to high school. So we have 3 different competitions. It's elementary, middle school, and high school that can compete for different prize amounts. The highest is $1,000.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's
I believe
incredible.
in investment in kids. Yeah.
See, and that's the thing. Like you are doing so much because I had a group from 2 people from Destination Innovation come on last fall to talk about Rock the Vote, because then you have a part that's just focused on voter education and voter turnout. So they talked about Rock the Vote. And I'm gonna have you on again to come back and talk all about Destination Innovation.
Yeah,
Give the whole
it's a
breakdown on
lot.
that.
We do a lot. We're totally youth focused. So our 3 core programs, of course, Camp Destination Innovation, which is entrepreneurship and STEM. And then you were just talking about Root to Power, which is voter engagement and teaching young people they might not have the power of their vote just yet, but they do have power of their voice to be a catalyst to change. And then we have, of course, Progeny, and Progeny are the youth touched by the juvenile justice system, that we're teaching leadership, advocacy, how to change policy in a way it impacts them. And their campaigns that we have with Progeny right now are Invest Don't Arrest Kansas, which is about closing down that last juvenile prison. We don't feel like you should profit off of the pain and trauma of young people. And then we also have debt-free justice, to kind of address the issues of all the fines and fees they put on kids in marginalized communities when these kids get in trouble, which is just out of control.
And that's really, I mean, I was at a presentation in Wichita a few weeks ago, and you were talking about that work in particular, which is
Mhm.
at the end of that presentation, I was like, okay, I want to have you on my little show and do whatever I can to help get the word out about the work that you're doing in terms of juvenile fines and fees. And that's also why we're happy to have Youssef join us today. So how did you get started in this type of work? What's going on with the type of work, and what's the progress that you're making?
Specifically with Progeny, when I used to work at the Seed House, is another nonprofit I used to work for. It's a blessing to have a nonprofit that supports your dream while you're working for them, and that's what they did at the Seed House. But we were approached by Kansas Appleseed to mentor some young people that had been touched by the juvenile justice system. And we were just supposed to be mentoring, and it was a program that they were going to kind of let go because they're in a different state and the kids were all in Wichita. It was just difficult. And I asked them, hey, can we keep this going on? This is important work. And so they were like, yeah. And so we took over the program, and the name Progeny was born in our little office that we used to work in with the youth that we were working with at the time, because they wanted the people to understand, or the public to understand, we are what you created. Too often we hear conversations, what's wrong with young people? What is all this? Well, look in the mirror, look at the world that we're giving them. These are young people. They are what we created. And so they wanted adults to take some in the system, to take some investment in that, or whatsoever. And so how we got into the fines and fees work, our work with Progeny, we work on a local, state, and national level. And we started to get national attention. And so they approached us about the fines and fees that were going on in Kansas. This is an issue that we had already been discussing anyways. And we started working on a national level with debt-free justice. And then we have a Kansas-based cohort too, that tackles the policies and issues that are going on within Kansas with Kansas youth and the juvenile justice system. So it's layered. Yeah.
Right. So in case someone is not, it has not been, I love the phrase, has not been touched by the juvenile justice system. Talk to us about the fines and fees. It was very eye-opening to me how this, I don't know what the right analogy, spiral or this snowball or what happens in terms of.
I always say once the system gets a hold of your child in any kind of way, they never let them go. And so what happens is if you just say your kid got arrested for even violating curfew, or just say they stole something or they got in a fight. Let's utilize school. They got in a fight at school. And so they got arrested for that. They have to go through a process, and most people can't afford to get an attorney to defend their kid once they got arrested. So they get a public defender. Your kid usually should be offered diversion, but most parents don't know there's a law on the books that says you cannot be denied diversion because you can't afford it. Loosely, it doesn't say it exactly like that, but a child should not be denied diversion because they can't afford to pay for it. But most people don't know this. And so even if they're given diversion as an option, if they cannot afford it, then they'll take a plea deal. Well, the plea deal puts your child on probation. Sometimes they put these kids on probation for 5 years, which is ludicrous to me. And then you start to get the fines and fees associated with getting involved with the court system, getting arrested. If the state decides to take custody of your kid, there's fines and fees associated with that. Sometimes these kids have to pay restitution. And all this money that's going back into the system does not even go to train public defenders. It goes to train prosecutors. And when you're understanding public defenders, sometimes these public defenders do not have a history of doing criminal law. It can be an insurance attorney. It can be a divorce attorney. And they're just trying to pick up extra money, and they take on these cases. And so it starts this cycle of these kids being getting these fines and fees tacked on to them.
So
Well,
it's one of those things also, if you can't pay the fine, there's a fine because you can't pay the fine.
there you go. If you can't
Yeah.
pay the fine, you get a fine for not being able to pay the fine, or you go to jail for not being able to pay the fine. And when you're in jail, you get more fines tacked on you because you're back in jail again. And it just snowballs where these kids are accruing all these fines and fees that carries on into their adulthood. And by the time they get a job that can actually help themselves survive, their checks are getting garnished because of the fines and fees that they owe to the state or to the city. And it creates this cycle of these young people being on survival mode all the time. And oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, do you have any idea who is in charge of not like assessing them, but like deciding these fines? Like, what's the body that says we're gonna have a fine for this and a fee for that and a fine for this? Like, where are these coming from?
Well, the policies are created through the House and the Senate, and they're submitted by, commissioners. They're submitted by police departments. They're submitted by DCF. All these different policies that, the courts, the judges, create these fines and fees because they want the kids to have some kind of accountability and skin in the game. And when they're not taken into account,
is that what they say?
Yeah, they literally I was in Washington, D.C., and we were literally not lobbying, I can't use that term because I'm a nonprofit. We were not lobbying, but we were going to talk to our constituents about why they're creating these policies. And the big question that came up was, well, the kids got to have some kind of accountability. They need to have some kind of skin in the game. But I'm like, if these kids already coming from poverty, and half the decisions that they're making are based on survival mode, how can they have skin and how can they have accountability around this? You're creating a bigger hole for these young people that they can't get out. And I remember us having a session on fines and fees with kids, and there was a little girl in there. I think she was about 8 or 9 years old. And she turned around and she looks at me and she goes, "Wait a minute. So you're telling me that if you have money, you don't go to jail. But if you don't have money, you go to jail?" Absolutely. And if an 8 or 9-year-old child can look at that and be like in disbelief over it, why come our policymakers can't do the same?
Well, I've got some opinions on that, but I'll keep those to
Right.
myself. All right. So now, progeny, that's kind of the cycle, right? And I mean, I was gonna say at least Sedgwick County has a public defender's office. I've had Mark Dupree from Wyandotte County, and he's trying to get a public defender's office in Wyandotte
Right.
County. Same ideas with this idea that if a person is arrested, they might be not offered bail. If they can't make bail, then they sit in jail. And if you sit in jail, then you have fines. And if you're in jail, then you can't go to your job to get the money to get pay. So it's just this, it's this horrible cycle.
It's a horrible, horrible cycle that constantly accrues and it does not go away. And if you factor in that Black and brown youth are most likely to be profiled and pulled over,
Right.
It's a cycle that they can't get out of.
Right. Okay. So let's talk about the work that you have been doing. And if Yusuf wants to jump in, because I know, or you actually, Yusuf, what's your background? How did you come to this work with Progeny?
So I came to work with Progeny in about like 2018. I was referred through a mentor with Jag, Kansas, and that's where it all started. So originally, when I got into this work, I didn't necessarily know I had a story, because as males coming up, growing up, having a hard life, you're taught to like mask that, and you're supposed to, not talk about that. So, Marquetta, got with me and started mentoring me and like, tell your story, tell your story. I'm like, what story? And then, that's when I started to realize like, wow, this is really, I've really had it, and this is a lot of trauma that I've been dealing with throughout my life.
Yeah. And so go ahead.
Oh, I just want to emphasize one of the things when we talk about these young people, because I'm very adamant about, movements, not doing the trauma stuff and utilizing these young people's stories to further a movement. And so everybody in our programs, they're empowered to tell their story or not. That's their choice. If they want to tell their story, they can. And if they don't want to, they don't have to. They don't have to share parts of themselves that is like ripping off a Band-Aid and they have to heal from it all over again. With Yusuf, his story is so powerful. And one of the things that we always tell young people, your story is your sword and not your crutch. So you're not looking for people to feel sorry for you. You're showing that despite all that you went through, you're still here. You're still standing and you're wielding your story like a sword. And Yusuf has wielded his story like a sword and has become an avenue for him to, we just watched a clip of his documentary that is going to premiere in DC on September 12th. And when I tell you I had tears in my eyes about what this story is going to do for other young people that have been in the foster care system and other young people that share his story, and open your eyes to how the foster care system, the prison pipelines are like tremendous. So
tell us about Yusuf, tell us about your documentary.
Yeah, so my documentary is kind of like a two-part series. It comes out here next month. So it's crazy. Like when when I was doing a documentary, I never realized like that I had lived through all this trauma and all this pain. And like when I'm going down memory lane, going to old places and speaking with old foster homes, you just never knew that your life was that impactful. And so I'm eager to show everyone like what I went through and show everyone, my story.
And so where will it be? Will it be aired, or will you be premiering it someplace in Wichita, or how can people see it?
The goal is to air it here in Wichita. We've had talks with the Kansas Leadership Center about premiering it there.
The Kansas African American
Yeah.
Museum and Tallgrass Film Festival.
Yeah, she knows all these places. So I've had I know I'm going to post it on my social networks and things of that nature. So I do plan. My long-term goal is to actually get a website funded and create a website so that people can always have access to it around the world. So.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think for those that want to watch it when it premieres in DC, there is a link to it that I'll send over to you, where people can watch it premiere live in DC as well.
Awesome. And you said it was like a two-part.
Yes, kind of sort of like a two-part. We had to cut a lot of it down for this premiere. I think the final cut got down like 15, 16 minutes, but there's a lot more to it. I think there's like over 90 minutes because we shot for like 5-6 days. So but we had to cut it down to, a manageable amount so we can keep viewers interested in, things like that.
Okay, fantastic. So what other type of work are you involved with Progeny? I know you've been traveling some. I know you're on different youth boards. So tell us about what you're doing with around this whole area.
Man, so like everything, so I'm about to just use this phrase. So I was with Dream Justice Cohort last month, and one of the organizers said, yeah, I love Dream. Dream is my husband, you know. So like I kind of put that like with Progeny. Progeny has become like my wife, you know. So like everything like involving Progeny, like I'm kind of been involved, or whether it's in the forefront background. So like kind of like Progeny has become sort of like my life, you know, whether it's advocating for youth who are in the foster care system, or it's, you know, advocating for foster youth who are in the foster care system. So like, you know,
Mm-hmm.
I'm everything involved Progeny, like I've been involved with it. So.
And
Awesome.
beyond that, I think too, because Yusuf ultimately wants to start his own nonprofit. And so we're going to be training him to learn how to be executive director, how to write grants, how to build his own nonprofit. And he has set in every pocket of Destination Innovation. So just not Progeny. There's a lot of work within the confines of Progeny, but he's also helped with Camp DI. He's also helped with Root the Power. And so he's learning how all those, each one of those programs work, with the mindset, hopefully, eventually, that he'll know how to frame what he wants to do in his own nonprofit when he starts it. He just recently, and I'm so hyped about you, so I apologize.
I know,
Um,
and I'm like,
yeah,
I'm gonna let you talk because I mean, I've heard him talk more extensively. So I was like, well, yeah, go ahead.
the award that you won just last month, what was that one called?
Transformative Youth Advocate of the Year.
He's won Transformative Youth Advocate of the Year. He's won CJJ, a youth award from CJJ
That was the
about
Spirit of the Youth.
Spirit of the Youth Award. That was like 2 years ago.
That was just last year.
Oh, just last year. And then he just recently he's won Next Gen Under 30, and so he's going to be recognized for that as well. And I think this is just the beginning of all the accolades Yusuf is going to get around his work that he's doing. He's been really passionate about the work around with DI and around Progeny, and specifically, you know, when he first came in, of course, these young people are still going through it. That life is still happening, and so every time the world tried to knock Yusuf down, he always came back with a smile on his face and ready to go. And most people be ready to quit, you know, and he
Yeah.
never quit. And so his resiliency, and I'm kind of hating that word when it comes to us, but his resiliency is just tremendous. And his positive attitude in this work is just remarkable. So I get teared up when I think about any of the young people that I mentor, but particularly Yusuf, knowing where he started and knowing the trajectory of his life right now. It's doing exactly what we want the program to do. And
That's
he's
awesome.
gonna move so far beyond us, it's ridiculous.
That's awesome. So moving into the future, you talked about a lot of advocacy, and I'd asked that question about where do these fines come from. And I know there were bills that try to make their way through the legislature last year dealing with juvenile fines and fees. No need to tip your hat, right? No need to show your hand. But what's like what's do you have plans to try to address that again? Like what are some of the
Absolutely.
steps? What are your next steps that you're taking to try to address the situation?
We're meeting around that on a state level right now, around how we're going to go gear up for the next round of fight that we have to do to get this legislator passed. I think I was just looking online, and Arizona just passed where there's no more fines and fees for young people.
All
States
right.
around the country are doing this right now. And I want Kansas, sometimes we tend to be slow to change. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and that's not it's not healthy for our young people to move slow on this. Um, Too often when we're trying to pass policies and stuff like that, it's always our education, our sick, and our poor that we want to put at the bottom of the barrel. Um,
Right.
and that does not create healthy communities when you operate that way. And our young, again, I'm totally against us praying and actually capitalizing off the backs of our children's trauma. Like I always ask people, what side of history do you want to be on?
Mm-hmm.
And why can we can't be on the side of history that's seeing value and not making life so hard for our young people? Our campaign with Debt Free Justice is a future should not be fine. And so when we talk about, we have Katie. Katie is one of the progeny members. She's over there on the side. And when you talk about, some of the things that don't make me put you on camera.
It's going to be a family affair here.
It's a family thing. But when you think about some of the things and the trauma that these young people go through just off of fines and fees, just because they made a mistake when they were kids. I think, Kate, you were like 14 years old. She's 21 now and still paying and cycling through the mistake that she made when she was a 14-year-old child. Come on.
I think she should be on camera.
Yeah.
I think.
Come on, Katie.
Come on, Katie.
Sorry, we family over here. So, and all their stories are so powerful and important. And this is Caitlin.
Hi.
We call her Katie affectionately. But you want to talk a little bit about
about my story?
Yeah, just a little. You don't have to share.
So I had my child in the juvenile prison. He was a year old when I got out. So I've been dealing with that for a while now. And I think that was probably the hardest part about the whole situation is being pregnant in there. And I went through the whole term of being pregnant in there. And general population with the person I caught my charge with. So.
Oh no.
Yep.
Wow. Man, but here's the thing that because I hear you. I don't want to like spend time dwelling on the trauma aspect of it. I want to spend time, talking about the things that you're doing to alleviate the situation, the things that you're doing to make sure that it's better for people who are coming after us, right? Like that's even a lot of the work I do. My little realm of influences may not be broad, but I'm like, well, as long as I leave this place better for my kids than how I found it, I will be happy at the end of the day. So thank you, Katie, for being involved. So what are your goals and hopes with Progeny?
So my goal is to help keep, if they do make it into the prison or to the system being pregnant, my goal is to help not cater, but to help get them their needs and to fulfill the things that they need while they're incarcerated.
Advocated for pregnant women who are incarcerated. Yes, man, that's awesome.
And we're talking about pregnant young people in the juvenile justice. I mean, young. So to go through a pregnancy when you're a teenager is hard enough. I myself was a teen mom. So going through a teen pregnancy is hard enough. Imagine going through a teen pregnancy, without your parents there in a in a jail. Mm-hmm. And when it comes to Black women and health, I was recently at an ER with Caitlin. But that experience was just traumatic because, they don't listen to Black women. And so imagine being a young Black or brown girl in jail and pregnant and saying you need something and not having your needs met because they don't believe you.
Yeah. I'd probably say something about that considering I was in the higher grounds at treatment facility.
Listen, yeah.
I was in a treatment facility and I was smoking a black and I took it was aspirin. I can't have aspirin. It makes my heart race. So I took an aspirin and my hands started sweating and my heart was racing and I was sitting there kind of feeling a little weird. So I told the counselor, I was like, there's something wrong and I need help. And so she told me I could go to the bathroom and get some water. So I went to the bathroom and I got some water and I came back in there and I said, I'm going to the hospital. So I grabbed my phone and I tried to walk out the door. She's like, I can't let you leave like that. So she called an ambulance and she went outside and she sat there with me. And then she finally seen that I seized up and I'm sitting here like this. And I'm guessing it's a treatment facility. So they're thinking I'm doing drugs. I just got off of work. I just worked 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. And I took an aspirin because my hip was hurting.
And that's how they treated her when she was in the ER. And so you think about the things, and I'm teaching her how to advocate for herself. And the doctor got offended. And I'm like, how can you get offended? Because I'm teaching her how to advocate for herself in a hospital setting. Our young people go through so much in these spaces, dealing with fines and fees. She's dealing with fines and fees right now. And it carries over into their adulthood and the advocacy that Caitlin, she just spoke on a panel about 2 months ago. Yeah. She was phenomenal. And Katie's just now started being in the space where she's comfortable sitting on these panels and having these discussions, but she's ready to start telling her story because it's impacted her so hard that she doesn't want other young women to go through this. And so these young people, one of the things that I love about the work that I do, and what is the mission of our work, is connecting young people to the network, the resources, and the mindset to be successful leaders, no matter where they come from, no matter what their backgrounds are. This program works, and it connects them to different opportunities that they never would have gotten to start off with. And it's changing their lives. And the one thing that we're big on in DI is too often for movements, we go into marginalized communities, we get their stories, and we send them right back to poverty and struggle.
Right.
Now, we can't take away necessarily all the poverty and struggle, but what we do make sure is that they're not going to leave our spaces without being invested in. And so making sure that our young people get stipends for the work that they do. We connect them to work and opportunities that pay them. We make sure that they leave with knowing that they are worthy of being invested in. And our goal when they age out is to make sure that we are connecting them to jobs and connecting them to opportunities, or writing letters of recommendations for them to go back to school. But
Right.
we're not gonna use them for these campaigns and these movements and be like, okay, well, you're done with you now. See you later.
Right.
I'll mentor them until they're sick of me and be like, listen, it's
No, and I'm
enough
glad
now.
you do. I'm glad you
Yeah.
do. So
Yeah.
here's my question, because we're almost out of time here.
Yeah.
If someone's listening to you talk about the work that you're doing with Progenation, Progenation, I can't say it. Progeny,
Progeny.
Camp,
MBI.
Destination,
Yeah.
Destination, or Route to Power. How can they? I mean, I will put in links to the website. What do you need? Is there something that you need from people? How can they help? How can they get involved?
Literally, I always tell people our youth are the best investment you can make that yields the best returns. So if you're investing money, it allows us to continue to pay them the way that we do. If you're investing your time and your mentorship, it allows us to connect them to proper mentors and opportunities. Talk about us. That's free. Spread the word about us and the work that we're doing with our young people. Because the more people that know about it, the more people can invest time, resources, money. It's a beautiful thing, because our need for in Kansas. I get calls from young people every day. Kaylin has already referred young people over to me that need help. I get calls from young people in crisis that need help every single day.
I should ask, do you only operate in the Wichita area, or do you?
No, Progeny is based on it's Kansas level. So we work with around the state of Kansas now, primarily because we're here. Most of our work is focused here, but we will work with anybody across the state.
Gotcha.
We just need to make sure that we have all of our advocates. And I always say community moves. So as much community, nonprofits is our community work. So as much community support that we have, we can continue to spread our wings, get more people in that can help these young people, and make sure that they're not going back or cycling back into the system, or cycling back into poverty, and creating jobs and opportunities for our young people so they can be successful adults.
I love it. All right. Well, that half an hour fled by. So thank you so much for taking the time. And Katie, it was not Katie, right? I was gonna say Caitlin, but I think Caitlin's your full name. But okay, so I had both names in my head, and anyway. But thank you so much for taking the time, Marquetta. Always nice to see you again. I was floored when I heard your last presentation in Wichita, and I knew that at least what I could do is try to help spread the word about the program and the work that you're doing. And when you gear up to go into the next legislative session, I think this is something that so obviously disproportionately impacts the Black community. So I would love to help you in any way I can, just to help. Yeah.
We just need to show up as a community when those policies are being passed. We need to be up and to peak of full force. So these young people, when they're going up in testimony, that we have their back, and they're showing that the community is watching and wants to see change. And if you want to learn more about our work, go to destinationinnovation.org.
All right. Thank you very much. All right, everyone. That's it for today. And I will see you next week. Oh, I always have to leave time at the end to talk about voting, because it is important that our community votes, right? There is an election coming up. The primary is over. There's an election coming up on November 7th. Please make sure you're registered to vote. Please make sure you make a plan for voting. I have plans to talk about voting as we get closer to the election. But as I'm trying to tell anyone who will listen, politicians only pay attention to people who pay attention to them. And if our community does not vote in large numbers consistently, then politicians have no reason to pay attention to what the needs of our community are. So I always want to be an advocate to make sure that the Black community is registered and that we're voting and we're getting people out to vote.
And come to our Rock the Block. We do a Rock the Block in October with our Root the Power programs. All our programs will be there. But it's young speakers, young performers. We have free food. And then we line up all of our first-time voters in front of us, and we all go vote together. So it's getting that next generation ready and empowered and inspired to vote. So if you show up, these young people will show up too. Let's show them the way.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody. I will see you next week.
See you next week.